Welcome everyone to our session. It's called Wikipedia as a tool to accelerate adaptation knowledge, learn how to contribute. My name is Emma Baker. I'm the communications coordinator for the Climate and Development Knowledge Network. And I'm based in South Africa at South North. We have a really exciting session for you today, all about Wikipedia and how this platform can be used in enhancing knowledge on adaptation. And so far it has really not been much utilized by the climate change community. So we're really excited to share more information with you today. Before we start, I'd just like to bring to your attention in the platform you're watching in, there's a chat box at the top right of the screen next to the agenda. Please click on there and introduce yourself and tell us who you are, where you're from. We'd really like to know who's joining us in the session today. And my colleagues at CDKN will also be sharing some links and more information with you in that chat box as we go through. So please do check the chat box, and also feel free to ask any questions in the box as we go along. Let's look at the agenda for today. Next slide, please, Lisa. Thanks. Okay, so we'll start off with a little poll, and then I'll be talking to you about CDKN and our Wikipedia journey. Then we'll be hearing from Samira Banerjee, who will talk to you from the perspective of a climate change researcher and project manager and the opportunities that exist for the climate change community. Then we'll be hearing from Subodh Kulkarni from the Center for Internet and Society, and he will be talking to us about his work as part of the Access to Knowledge project and what he's been doing in India. And then we'll hear from Alex Stinson from the Wikimedia Foundation, who will take us through some of the nitty-gritty of Wikipedia, what is the current coverage of climate change adaptation topics, and he'll even get us started on how to make your first edit and how Wikipedia works. So that's very, very exciting. So before we get into that, we'd just like to do a short poll on where you are from, where you're joining from today. So hopefully this will be launched very shortly in the platform. We would really like to know firstly which region you are joining from. And there's currently, well, as we wait for the poll to be shown, there were only 4 options. So we went for the 3 regions of the global south, Africa, Asia, and South America. And then we've had to put the rest of the world into the other category. So please do fill that in when you see it appear. There it is. Oh, so the first question is actually going to be about your gender. So please can you tell us whether you're female, male, non-binary, or prefer not to say. And you'll hear a little bit later why this is important to us in the context of Wikipedia. So please do fill that in. And then I think we can move to the results. Just waiting for the results to appear on the screen. I'll use this opportunity to thank our colleagues at the Adaptation Futures Secretariat for their wonderful tech support during this session, which is quite complicated. So I'm very glad to see that it's going smoothly so far. Is it possible to move to the results now, Ritu? Oh, I see them. Sorry, my apologies. Okay, we actually have a majority female, 75% female, 25% male joining us. So let's move to the next question to find out which region people are joining us from. There it is. Okay, so we've got Africa, Asia, Latin America, and others. Apologies for making you feel othered. But as CDKN, we work across the global south, or the majority world, as we're now referring to it. And we actually have partners in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So this is really the regions that we work in and we would like to be reaching with our sessions. But of course, with Wikipedia and Wiki in general, everybody is welcome, wherever you come from, you know, so, and we're very much, wanting to form collaborations across the world. So, very, very big welcome to everybody joining today. I think we could go to the results now, Ruta, if you can. There it is, 50-50, Africa and Asia. Oh, that's quite interesting. Thank you to those people in Asia who have stayed late into the evening. I know it's late hours for you, so thanks very much for joining us. And let's see, maybe we'll have some more people joining during the course of the session. Otherwise, I think we can move on to the next slide. So just to give a little bit of background on CDKN, the Climate and Development Knowledge Network. So this is a program run by South North in South Africa. As I mentioned, we have our partners ICLEI South Asia, working from India in the South Asia region, and we have FLA in Latin America, working in the Andean region. And really what we are doing on our program, which was called the Knowledge Accelerator program, and it's been running since 2018. It's all around linking knowledge and action on climate change. So how can we match and tailor the wealth of knowledge on climate change with those people, mostly decision makers, policymakers in developing countries, to support them with their needs in terms of knowledge on climate change, to make better decisions, to improve policies, to and support collaboration and learning. And also we empower climate leaders and champions. And so our Wikipedia work that we've been doing really fits into this aim, both in terms of our communications work and knowledge sharing, making sure the latest information on climate change is accessible to everyone around the world, as well as empowering climate change researchers, especially in the global south, as I mentioned before, to be able to share their work and their knowledge on climate change with a broader public, and reaching people who use Wikipedia on a daily basis. So now, thanks, Lisa, we can go to the video. So I just wanted to start by showing you a video, actually, because I think this really sums up some of the reasons why we started this work, and really, a lot of the context behind it. So let's play the video and enjoy. Oh, sorry, Lisa, we can't hear the sound. I think maybe you need to unmute for this. Sorry about that, we didn't test it in advance. Let's try again.
I wanted to participate in this to learn how someone becomes a Wikipedia editor.
An editathon is when a group of people come together to edit Wikipedia on a specific topic. This is the first time an editathon has actually been held on climate change, focused on Africa.
Topics related to Africa are very poorly covered, and this creates a knowledge gap.
With this event, we're bringing together African scholars to build a community of African editors focused on climate change.
I have entered edits into the page of climate change adaptation, which was really scanty when looking at it.
I've been able to edit pages around climate change and agriculture, specifically on Africa.
There are very many advantages of having a dedicated event. You concentrate more on learning.
Having Wikimedia, it's also easier to ask questions.
The impact of Wikipedia is significant. It's accessible in over 300 languages.
Nous devons aussi, en tant que chercheurs, mettre des informations en français.
I thought it was a very good opportunity to let my research be known.
My eyes have been opened to, if I want the good information there, I can help put it there.
Coming together with other researchers has been exciting because you're able to read together and write together, as well as bouncing ideas off of each other.
It has been a very nice experience, and I hope that connection would continue.
As a woman, my participation would be important to put the word out there that gender, yes, women can participate in sharing information. So I think other researchers broadly should also come in and edit and see what they can add to Wikipedia.
Thanks very much, Lisa. So yes, as you saw, that was our very first editathon that we held in collaboration with Future Climate for Africa back in 2019. And really it was in response to what you heard being explained there in the video, that really there's really a real lack of Wikipedia editors from the Global South, especially Africa. And yet, as you saw, there's so many researchers and practitioners out there who have a lot of information to share and would love to have their knowledge and their research being accessed by, I think Douglas said in the video, 300 million people worldwide or something. So obviously, yeah, this was a much needed intervention that we started with. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we actually then went on to produce a how-to guide for editing climate change information on Wikipedia. And we've produced this in English and Spanish. And you can find the guide on our website at www.cdkn.org/Wikipedia. And really, yeah, this guide not only gives people tips and hints on how to get started with editing Wikipedia. It also goes through as for researchers to learn about the the specific communication type that's needed for adding information to Wikipedia. And it also has a section on hosting your own editathon. If anyone is interested in doing so, if they feel inspired by our editathons. And speaking of editathons, if we go to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about the biggest editathon we've had so far. It was called Wiki for Climate, and we held it online at the end of last year, 2020. And this was actually supposed to be, well, originally we thought that we would do an in-person editathon at Adaptation Futures. But unfortunately, the reality was that we had to move online, and this actually allowed us to explore the opportunity of having a broader audience for an editathon. As you saw with our first video, we very much focused on a small group of African researchers. Then with Wiki for Climate, we decided to open this up to anybody who was interested, but specifically encouraging people from the Global South, and especially women, to be involved. And I have to say, yes, from a one-week event, we actually gained quite a lot of impact. We had 275 people sign up from over 60 countries. In the end, we had 68 people who actively edited during the week. 72% were from the Global South and 51% were women, so that was brilliant. And then during the whole week of the Editathon, we improved over 200 articles on Wikipedia related to climate change. And since then, these have actually gained over 15 million views. So that's in almost a year later, views to those pages have been over 15 million, which is very impressive. So I'm now going to actually hand over to Samira Banerjee, who was a participant in Wiki for Climate. And she is a project manager and researcher at Jadavpur University in India. And she's currently working on the UKRI GCRF Living Deltas Hub. And her specific research area is the Indian Sundarban Delta. So Samira, please, would you tell us a bit more about what you learned as a participant at Wiki for Climate and the opportunities that you see for other climate change researchers and project managers? Thanks.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks to CDKN for this opportunity so I can share my experience during the Wiki for Climate Editathon. Lisa, if you could kindly share my slides. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I purposefully titled my presentation as, it's a world of opportunities for the climate change community because, I felt it once I was introduced to it. So I would like to share more on it now. Next slide, please. So Emma has already introduced me, and based on my background as a project manager and also as a researcher on climate change, I really benefited a lot from the Editathon. And my study area is the Indian Sundarban Delta. So obviously I could add evidences from the Delta, which I'll elaborate on in the next few slides. Next slide, please, Lisa. So first, how was the process of editing during the Wiki for Climate? Next slide. The bottom line was that it was very well planned across stages. So what happened before the event, I was very intimidated to edit Wikipedia pages. I was concerned that I might end up making the information, the quality of it poorer. I may add wrong references. What if, all these questions were in my mind. But then when I signed up for the event, I was also shared the guidebook, which Emma mentioned just a few minutes back. And in that, there was a detailed description of, how to go about it, a step-by-step demonstration. So, I started reading it and I started feeling better, little more confident than I was initially feeling. And then during the event, I found that editing was easy, quick, and rewarding. Easy because we had fantastic guidance, which was provided in real time by other editors and mentors. And since this was an online event, so there was a Slack workroom which was created, and we had round-the-clock guidance from mentors who were keeping a track of where we were, what we were editing, and guiding us throughout how we can improve it. There was live demonstration of editing during the opening session. So we learned how to do it and the importance of communication in the talk pages. And the most important thing which I learned was the etiquette to avoid edit wars, which I think I made 3 or 4 edits, and those were reverted by a bot. And my novice self, I completely went and I reverted all the edits, but then I learned from the mentors on the Slack workroom that that was not the correct thing to do, but to respond as to why it shouldn't be reverted and why it's a valid source. So this was a big learning for me, that my attitude was wrong back then. So I think for future also, it really helped me keep that in mind and go ahead. Next slide, please, Lisa. So now that brings me to the next part that, so what did I actually edit during the editathon? Next slide, please. To sum it up, since I'm a researcher, I'm also a project manager, and I'm very interested in research communications. So I tried to map it out across the different groups, and I found it was really valuable. For researchers, it gives the opportunity to increase citations, not just your own citations, but also of your peers, and to make your research more accessible. And you have the opportunity to update new evidence faster. So, a paper is published and, you don't need to wait to cite that paper in your future journal paper, which will again take time. And there is this whole issue around paywalls, and Wikipedia is free. So knowledge is free. And as a project manager, I felt, we are always tasked with succinct report writing, and that skill was extended when I was doing the Wikipedia editing. And we are also trained to put together research findings in a nutshell when we are writing reports to funders especially. So I found that skill very translatable for the Wikipedia editing as well. So that way, even for project managers, it's easy to do. And for research communicators, the best part is that it's easy communication to a wider audience. So you have policymakers reading it, you have other researchers reading it, you have even school students reading it. So you're reaching out to a wider audience, which possibly is not which possibly does not happen with a journal article or your traditional research outputs. And I would say the flexibility of communication across languages, where we are working in the regions. So the opportunity to reach out to communities there, to practitioners in the Delta, in their own language, this is a big bonus. Next slide, please, Lisa. Personally, for me, I found it really useful that I could put in local evidences on a global platform. So I could share, the pages which I edited were on climate change adaptation, and I put in evidences from India, especially from the Indian Sundarban Delta, from the Mahanadi Delta, based on our work in DECMA project. Then I could input information on gender and climate change, also include the gendered impacts of cyclones. In Indian Sundarban Delta, we have faced 3 cyclones in the past 18 months, and how it has affected people and how genders are disproportionately affected. Also, it sees a rise in trafficking and early marriage, child labor. So I could include these evidences from newspaper reports. And it was done in a very short period of time. So the cyclones were occurring, and say within a few months of it, I could go ahead and update. And finally, I could even make very small edits, be it a minor typographical error or just linking it to another, maybe a robust knowledge source. So it was not just adding in chunks of paragraphs, but also the minor changes. I was taught that the minor changes also make a difference and help in improving the quality of the pages. Next slide, please. So why Wikipedia for climate change? Next slide, please. I think the bottom line, which I felt after coming out of the editathon, after that week-long experience, was that I really felt empowered, that I have the agency to make knowledge more accessible, that I can highlight local evidences on a global platform, and that it's my opportunity to give back to Wikipedia, because all this while we have only taken. So the first source of any information, any topic we want to look into, I at least refer to Wikipedia to get an overview of concepts and ideas, and then I follow on with the citations in the article. So I really felt empowered that I have the agency to give back to Wikipedia as well. And as I mentioned earlier, that it's free and not behind any paywall. So that was the big bonus for me. With this, I would like to thank everyone for joining in, and thanks to the session organizers and the Adaptation Futures organizing committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samana. That was brilliant to hear your take from your own experience editing Wikipedia as a climate change researcher and a project manager. And it's really amazing to hear the kind of things you've been editing. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, because otherwise I really don't think that information would have made it onto Wikipedia otherwise. So I just wanted to mention for everybody listening to please put your questions, if you have any, into the chat box, which you can find on the top right-hand corner of your screen next to the agenda. So as we go through, please do put any questions there, and we'll come back to them as we go. For now, I'd like to hand over to our next speaker, Subodh Kulkarni. And Subodh is the Senior Program Officer with the Access to Knowledge team at the Center for Internet and Society in India. And they have been facilitating some projects on building environmental knowledge repositories on Wiki. And he's going to share some examples of these projects and how citizens and community-based organizations contribute to Wikimedia projects on environmental issues. So over to you, Subodh.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity given to me on behalf of CIS-A2K, Center for Internet and Society's Access to Knowledge program. So we have been working with various partners in building environmental repositories on Wiki. So we have taken an integrated approach, not only on Wikipedia we are contributing, but on various platforms like the sister projects, Wikimedia Commons, Wikisource, and other Wiki species also we are contributing. So you all, I will start presenting now. So we all know all over the world, the greater challenges are ahead in the form of pollution, the illegal mining and other things. So there is a need to address this challenge of climate change and sustainable development. For that, we need substantial, good quality, reliable information that is lacking. We all know that many governments hide the information, real information. They mislead the people. They put on wrong environmental impact assessment reports on websites. We all see that in India at least. So the alert citizens as well as the community-based organizations, they can document the reality on Wiki with the help of reliable and trusted sources, because the sources and the reliable websites are also out of sight, and the people generally search nowadays in their own local languages on Wiki. So when they are searching on Wiki, they probably come across very less references, very less trusted sources and reliable information. So the effort is to document all these happenings in various places on Wiki in the form of Wikipedia articles, supported with all the trusted newspaper articles, then trusted reports, and the trusted government statistics also. So we are connecting all these non-accessible information through Wiki and through the Wiki article. So we are creating the articles on the villages or the rivers or the other climate change issues. So we have launched and designed one specific project, that is Project Jalabodh. Jala is water and Bodh is knowledge. So we have designed water knowledge repository project on Wiki. So we are building partnerships with various organizations as well as the citizen forums active in the region. in all states of India. So we are exploring various avenues to like build this knowledge. So we organize one, say, river dialogue on urban rivers. Then I will show you the link. So this you can see we organized one national level workshop with the help of Tarun Bharat Sangh. You all know that Waterman of India, Rajendra Singh ji, he is called Waterman of India. So he has now taken initiative to build knowledge across all the rivers of India. So we organize this workshop and the follow-up is being done. The workshop was organized in Rajasthan and various states participated in it. You can see various participants building knowledge around water. So we are going to the sources, trusted sources like the organizations who have been working in the field for the last 30 to 40 years, and they have collected all kinds of knowledge on that specific themes, say water or biodiversity or the nature or the pollution, like that. So they have repositories of knowledge, but we have to connect them with the larger knowledge base like Wiki, which is reaching to the people. Then we have started developing articles also. See, for example, I will show you very small example here. You can see this tab is not going. Yeah. So you can see this is an article about village Kokre. So this village has done a fantastic thing in water conservation. So this village is model example towards the other villages. So they have developed the article on their village as well as the water conservation activities in that village. So they have you can see they have uploaded the photographs also of all the water conservation activities in that village. So when other people see this article, then they take the inspiration also as well as the knowledge base also, how the village is developing through the water conservation works. Then there is another example. This is a drought-prone village in Marathwada region of Maharashtra. There also they have developed all the water conservation structures. They have written the articles with trusted sources and the reliable information is being put. And all the newspaper articles which were published during that time, they have been connected, attached here in the form of references. So the knowledge which is being published in newspapers, articles, that is temporary, we all know, it becomes e-junk afterwards, or the junk in our own hard copies, but it is archived in the form of articles here. So this is how we are developing the articles with the help of activists only. So the real people and the reality in the villages and the cities is being shown here in Wikipedia. So then this is a larger portal we have developed in Wiki Prakalpa Jalabodh. So here you can see we are developing the structure also, because in the local wikis the structures are not there. The English wikis, it is being contributed all over the world, so people are developing all kinds of formats, templates, and structures there for the articles. But in local wikis, the structures are not there, and the customization needs to be done according to the local situations. So you can see we have developed a structure for how the river article should be. So there are different sections about the infrastructure, about the pollution, about the livelihood depending upon that river, the tourism around that river, the rituals and religious festivals around that river. So all the sections we have developed in the form of structures, and according to this, the river articles are being developed. So we are developing templates, different article structures also. Then we are not documenting only on Wiki, we are documenting all the natural disasters in Wikimedia Commons as well. So you can see we have documented this 2019 floods in one district. Then we have also documented the recent ones Like in very recent, there were floods in Maharashtra. So you can see we are documenting the because we all know that during the incidents, uh, WhatsApp, Facebook, and all the social media channels are flooded with pictures. But after 6 months, we don't get any image. So archiving of all this knowledge in the form of photos, images is very much important on Commons. So now this repository is available for any researcher, for any reporter, for or any academician. So this is how we are contributing on Commons also. And apart from this, the images are there, the articles are there, but where the source material would be. So the trusted source material also we are developing. We are the relicensing is being done. So you can see the relicensing is being done by the organizations. So here in this one category, you can find all the material related to forest acts in India, then forest conservation laws in India, then the community-based forest practices, forest management practices. Everything is there in one portal. So in one gallery, you can see all the authentic and reliable material published by the trusted organizations. Likewise, the TBS also, Tarun Bharat Sangh also has released their material in Hindi, English, as well as in Marathi. So in different languages, the material is being uploaded here, and this is being taken to the wiki source. So we are converting this to Unicode searchable format in the format ebook, EPUB version, and all this material content is made searchable and freely available on internet and Wikimedia projects. So if anybody searches on internet any keyword from this book, the people are landing here in this gallery and they are exploring all this big repository of on water and biodiversity. Then we are documenting, we are carrying out various photo walks kind of things also. So we are documenting this biodiversity also. You can see the endangered species from various parts of India. They are being documented. We are collaborating with Gene Bank project here. So all these organizations have collected various endangered species and other things, samplings from all over India. They have large repository, but how it can be connected and archived on Wiki so that it is made available to the public at large, as well as the researchers and academicians, policymakers, etc. So we are taking this multi-pronged approach to bring all this knowledge on Wiki and make it searchable. So you can see some of the images. We are conducting thematic workshops also with these organizations. So Samuchit Envirotech is a leading organization working in climate change. Priyadarshini Karve, she is a well-known figure. She has taken now initiative to build knowledge on Wiki. So we are holding workshops also, thematic workshops also. In Women History Month, we conducted workshop, Women for Climate Change. So you can see these images. So thank you all. I have taken, I think, a few seconds more, but I have finished in time. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful, Sabad. It's always so exciting to see the work of our local communities on this. So hi, I'm Alex Stenson. I'm from the Wikimedia Foundation, and I am, so I'll share my screen. And I'm based in Uruguay, but I'm originally from the United States, and I focus on how our international communities develop different calls to action, like the work that's been happening with climate change and environmental issues. And an important thing to note about the Wikimedia movement is we have local communities like the one supported by CIS A2K that you just heard about. And then we have a kind of a global movement that's supported by the Wikimedia Foundation, which is where I sit. And this mix of local and international is a constant kind of tension and relationship as we look at Wikipedia. So they asked, the CDKN team asked me to talk a little bit about what we know about climate change knowledge on Wikimedia projects, and what's happening. The first thing to know is that if we start with a English Wikipedia, which of our 300 language Wikipedias gets about 50% of the traffic, and is also kind of the international language for policy making and science sharing around climate change. We know that there are about, oh, I thought I updated the statistic, 3,400 articles on English Wikipedia explicitly about climate change topics. So we know that there's of the about 6 million articles on English Wikipedia, there's a really small fraction of them that are explicitly about climate change. But this really small fraction is actually quite impactful because it's a tool for communication in one of the most used languages on the internet, right? It's when someone searches, say a policymaker hears a term and doesn't know about it, or when someone else is kind of at school or learning or reading the scientific literature and they encounter an English language term that they are not familiar with, they go to Wikipedia. And so the small number of articles actually ends up being a very important kind of reference point. But we also know that at least 7 language Wikipedia communities are organizing kind of content initiatives around climate change. The biggest other one besides English is on Spanish Wikipedia. So Proyecto Cambio Climático is also kind of organizing content. But we also have an international community group called Wikimedians for Sustainable Development, which is interested about sustainability and climate issues across a wide range of topics. What kind of impact is this content having? So I took a screenshot last night of the last 720 days of page views against the 3,400 articles on English Wikipedia. And we had about 250 million page views against this climate change explicit content in the last 2 years. And you can see like other climate communication, the COVID pandemic caused a crash in page views to the articles. But you can also see that as climate came back into the news coverage, as the pandemic kind of slowed down, we've been seeing again those spikes in attention on this content as both various like natural disasters. So some of these spikes in here are related to hurricanes and fires and other kinds of things. As the press pays attention to climate change, as the public talks about climate change, the public comes to Wikipedia. That's like the kind of basic conclusion. And 250 million page views is quite impactful. And we also, like, people come to the climate change content from different angles. For example, we have a lot of coverage of Greta Thunberg and David Attenborough, which in the global north are kind of very visible personas for representing climate issues. And so many people start there and then browse and learn about other topics connected to that. We also see, for example, in the context of South Asia, when climate activists, for example, when Disha Ravi became of quite a bit of attention in the press when she was arrested earlier in the year, we see a surge of attention to not only the activist, but also to the various kind of issues that they're connected to, including like climate change in India, for instance. And so what kind of scale are we talking about? So as I said earlier, normally on Wikipedia projects, English Wikipedia gets about 50% of the traffic. On climate topics, English Wikipedia gets less. Actually, we have less than 40% of the global traffic. I looked at a study for about a year of content, and actually less of the traffic goes to English Wikipedia. More of the traffic is going to other languages. And what we think is happening here, when we did the sampling, only about 3,000 of the 18,000 articles we looked at were in English. What we think is happening is because climate science and climate communication is so overwhelmingly Anglophone on the internet, when people hear about these concepts or talk about it in their local language context, Wikipedia is one of the few places where you can find a reliable kind of collection of knowledge. And also, as Subodh was showing, Wikipedia is one of the few places where a kind of public archive of the local context of climate issues can be found, right? So you may have like advocacy websites or government publications that are publishing the things they care about, but drawing together the connections between like news sources, academic research, multilingual source material. Wikipedia is kind of the de facto place for that. And what are we talking about? Well, and that's only the 3,400, 3,000 or so articles explicitly about climate change. As we know, as everyone in this conference knows, climate change is all of society, right? Every part of society is affected by climate change, which means every part of Wikipedia, those 6 million articles on English, fewer in other languages, are every one of those articles has a potential connection to climate change, or at least the vast majority of them. Any part of the economy, society, kind of social systems, political systems has an obligation to be thinking about climate change right now because we are in a global crisis. And so, for example, in the article Climate Change in Bangladesh, there's a whole section, or I mean agriculture in Bangladesh, there's a whole section about how communities, agricultural communities are affected by climate change and adapting to climate change. And every article that's about an economic issue or geography has that potential to be connected. So that's my kind of basic introduction to what it is. And the team invited me to talk a little bit and introduce you to editing. But I was wondering if before we dive into the editing, if there are any questions that came in from the conference platform that we should kind of give to the speakers beforehand.
Thank you, Alex. That's a great opportunity for questions. I actually can't see any right now. I'm not sure if, yeah.
Cool.
No questions so far. Would you like to just carry on? Or maybe I can say, as you go into the next section of your presentation, maybe you can touch on just how the different language wikis work, as in which content is on which one and how they work in kind of back end. And then also it was great to see in Subodh's presentation, you know, how much they've been using Wiki Commons and using it really as a free to use resource for reporters and anyone who needs to access those resources like photos and things. So it'd also be great if you could touch on the Wiki Commons as well. I'm not sure if you were already planning to do that, so apologies if you were, but if not, it would be great if you can cover that as you go ahead. Thanks, Alex.
I can definitely make those connections. Yeah.
Thanks.
So I think it's important to ask, like, as we dig into Wikipedia stuff, like, what exactly is it? I feel like a lot of people read Wikipedia, they engage with Wikipedia, they've encountered it on their search engine before or embedded in another website, but you may not know what exactly it is and what its scope is and what are the kind of founding principles. So when we talk about Wikipedia as kind of a system of knowledge or a website, it's important to think about the kind of underlying definition for Wikipedia. So it's a multilingual, web-based, free encyclopedia that anyone can edit, openly editable. And what's important to pay attention to here is its encyclopedic knowledge. So it's the knowledge that is aggregated across. There's a question for me to turn on my camera when I'm presenting it. It's not allowing me to, so I'm gonna focus on the presentation, if that's okay. So the thing to pay attention to is that as a web-based encyclopedia. It's a website, but it's also an encyclopedia, which means kind of following in the tradition of other encyclopedias. It summarizes knowledge. It connects sources together. It's not all about advocacy or new research, but a summary of the existing research that's sitting there in the back end. And it's openly editable, which means that it can be updated at any point. We have about 300 different language Wikipedias, and each has its own editorial community. This is really important to pay attention to, as Emma mentioned. Each editorial community has some, makes its own kind of editorial decisions. So I think the Wikipedia that Subodh showed earlier was documenting, I didn't catch what language that was. Was it Malayalam or was it Marathi? No, we'll find out.
Marathi.
So Marathi Wikipedia will have some different editorial policies than, say, English Wikipedia, because for their context and their language, documenting knowledge, summarizing the world's knowledge may require different standards. So just a caveat is what I'm saying is very common for like English language and some of the other big language Wikipedias. But as we get into smaller language Wikipedias, they might have different editorial policies. And if you're interested in doing Wikipedia editing, your local Wikipedia community, such as the ones supported by CIS A2K, can help you understand those differences. So generally speaking, the big language wikis rely on a couple overarching policies to make their content reliable. The first of these is notability. So notability is this idea that there are significant independent sources talking about a topic, or there's significant long-lasting public demand. Practically, on English language Wikipedia, this means there are lots of sources about this, so newspapers or other coverage. In some of the smaller language Wikipedias, these local Wikipedia communities have acknowledged, like, our knowledge is maybe not published in a newspaper or a book or an academic article. So we are going to focus on like truth or other ways of documenting, such as oral history. But on the big language Wikipedias, this is not as common. There are patterns of knowledge inequality and kind of bias baked into this kind of policy, right? Because if, say, you're in West Africa or parts of India, your ways of knowing may not be documented in the conventional sources that we would find on the internet. So the communities may not be favoring that content. And again, to make the content reliable, we often rely on this concept of verifiability. So Subodh talked about using references from kind of public archives and newspapers to aggregate information. This referencing behavior, which comes from kind of academic traditions the world over, it is really how we make sure that we meet two other policies on Wikipedia. One is no original research. This is the idea that we're not publishing opinion, but we're publishing established authoritative opinions by already published elsewhere in the world. On English Wikipedia, we like editorial sources with a history of good editorial practices. So this might be a newspaper, a book, an academic journal article, a reliable nonprofit like Climate Development Knowledge Network, who has a history of publishing reliable sources. And we try to use their opinions and aggregate them. The other tool we have, or the other policy we have, is neutral point of view. Neutral point of view is the idea that we try to weigh different opinions equally across different sources. And so that's kind of an important balancing point. There was a question in the chat about why systematic review, literature review papers hardly mention Wikipedia. I think the challenge with this, and because of this like notability, verifiability, no original research, and neutral point of view policy, Wikipedia articles are systemic reviews. systematic reviews. They're like a literature review that like a graduate student, like the best Wikipedia articles are like a literature review that a graduate student would do before writing their thesis, for instance. And so there's a real opportunity here as communicators, as science communicators or knowledge facilitators, access to knowledge facilitators, to kind of build that process into the research and expert communication communities we have around us. So if that's a kind of useful introduction, I'm going to show you what this means in practice. So if you were to want to edit Wikipedia, you would first log in or create an account in the top right-hand corner. Every Wikipedia has these interface buttons. So if I went to another language like Marathi Wikipedia, you'll notice that in the interface, you'll have a login and a create account button. If you log in or create account on any Wikipedia, you can use the same account across to other Wikipedias. And so I'm going to log into my account. And once I'm logged in, it's kind of useful to pay attention to the interface. I'm first going to show you what a good, successful edit looks like. And then I'm going to show you different ways of finding and approaching edits. And then I will introduce you briefly to Wikimedia Commons and Wikisource. And Subodh, could you drop some links to those categories that you had of images and Wikisource content, and I can show those directly. And so what is editing Wikipedia? Well, first, to know how to edit Wikipedia, it's useful to get oriented to the content on the Wikipedia article. So I was searching around for content about Wikipedia, about climate change in South Asia, and I realized that many of the state articles and city articles in India do not mention climate change or other environmental issues. And so I'm going to show you an edit on this Manipur page because there's plenty of research about the impact of climate change on Manipur, which is a state in the eastern end of India. And so to start with, I want to introduce you to the structure of the article. So Wikipedia articles have what's called an introduction or lead section. They have a actually, before I do that, I'm going to show you what a good edit looks like, and then I'm going to show you how to make those edits. So when we say editing Wikipedia is kind of a good strategic activity for climate communicators, there's kind of a couple places to do it. So as I was showing on the Manipur article, right here, there's this introductory section. Frequently, these introductory sections do not take into account major environmental issues. So this is an edit I made not too long ago about the petroleum article on English Wikipedia. Before this edit, the article just talked about the chemistry of petroleum and its use for industrial products. It had no mention of the environmental issues, which were well covered in other parts of the article. But we have some academic research that shows that most readers of Wikipedia stop or don't go too far past the introduction of the Wikipedia article. This is because they're often seeing the entry to the Wikipedia article as like a quick fact check. Like, what do I need to know about this topic? And the petroleum article was obviously missing something. It mentioned being a fossil fuel, but it didn't mention the connection of the fossil fuel to things like the petroleum industry, things like climate change, things like state-led wars, which are pretty important topics when you think about petroleum. So I was able to take the kind of sources that already existed in the article and summarize them in this lead to make it really accessible for someone who who's introduced to this topic. This is a really good science communication tactic. Drawing connections between science and the social impact of the science, or a topic, or a like industrial process, and the impact on that industrial process on humanity is like really important for addressing the triple planetary crisis we're facing, right? Climate change, pollution, biodiversity, all of these which have really big effects on human lives. often not covered in Wikipedia articles, just because no one's paid attention to that perspective. Another way to do a successful edit is maybe just to add a reference, a small sentence about these environmental issues. This is an edit I made not too long ago about the Chesapeake Bay. I'm originally from Virginia in the United States, and the Chesapeake Bay is experiencing sea level rise now. Whole islands are disappearing in the bay, and it is the main environmental issue for these communities. But it was not mentioned very much in the article. And so I was adding just a small edit, just adding 2 sentences and a little bit of editing, like was mentioned earlier in the presentation by Samana. It can make a big difference because it draws those connections for readers. And this article had about 23,000 page views before when I made this edit. Another example, and this is, I think, particularly important as we think about the global south, city articles. So just the other day, I was looking at cities in Nigeria when I was talking to one of our organizers there. And I noticed that Benin City, which is one of the biggest cities in Nigeria, didn't have any mention of its sustainable development and environmental issues, such as waste management, flood management, climate change, and urban heating. And so I spent about 30 minutes just finding 5 or 6 sources describing these issues to start sections in this article. I'm not from Benin City. I'm not from Nigeria. I also don't know much about the public there and what they would be interested in. So I didn't spend a huge amount of time working on this, but now that these sections exist, it's a real opportunity for local community members to think, oh, okay, how do I fill in this gap? How do I make this more useful for my public? And so I'm gonna show you now how to make an edit to Manipur. So I could start with this lead section, but the article doesn't actually cover environmental issues very much. And I don't know how important climate change and environmental issues are for Manipur. So what I might do is look for sections like climate or in economic areas like agriculture, which would be heavily affected by climate change. And so I might go down and I read the climate section and it's like, oh, this is interesting. There are just facts, uncited, with no references here, about the state of climate in Manipur. And there's no mention of climate change. This is probably a problem because climate change is everywhere. And so what I did is I did a little bit of a Google search, and I found this report from a local newspaper in Manipur that basically says trend analysis of weather variables in Impal mean that Manipur has kind of agricultural change already that's affecting that environmental change that's affecting agriculture. I did a little bit more searching. I also found a state action plan. I found and 2 articles kind of highlighting the agricultural issues. So first, I'm gonna make an edit about the climate article. I can say, so it's so Manipur's climate is largely influenced by X, Y, and Z topics. And what I can do is add a paragraph. Manipur is already experiencing climate change. But I won't add a link yet. I'll show you how to do that. Climate change with both increased variability in rain, as well as increasingly severe changes in temperature. This is not a perfect summary of the science, but it's a good place to start. And if it needs to be clarified, I can imagine someone else coming along to do it later. For this content to stick on Wikipedia, I need to add a citation. To do that, I would go to the top of the page here. I would click Cite, and I can drop the URL from that page into this tool. What it does is it tries to scrape the web page to create a decent citation. And in this case, it did okay. On some language Wikipedias, this tool doesn't work very well. And on some websites, especially in the Global South, the website is not formatted in a way that's easy to scrape the data. So in that case, you might go click Cite Manual and pick the type of citation that you most want: website, news, journal, etc. You'll notice that even though this created a bit of citation, it's not a very good one. So I can go in there and I can fill out more fields, just like you would in any other citation tool. So I might, for example, bring the author's name over. So I might copy and paste it. Or I might describe the source of the publisher. So the name of the website in this case is the Northeast Now. Northeast Now. So I might apply that reference, insert it, and click Publish Change. Adding a reference for effects of climate change. Voila, that's an edit to Wikipedia. I've just made a live edit that shares just a little bit more information about climate change if someone is reading about the climate of Manipur. This is the kind of edit that everyone in this room and everyone working in climate or science communication should be able to do. You should be able to make these edits, and they're really powerful. I have just connected an article that gets about 50, 60,000 page views a month. So I have a tool turned on right now that tells me this, about 60,000 page views. I've just connected it with climate change. Now, if someone comes down here and they read that and they're like, that's not very, very good. What you might want to do is also add links. For example, when they say experiencing climate change, I might want to go up here and click link and add a link to climate change in India. With that link, anyone who clicks might see that information, or we might want to add weather. I'm going to do extreme weather as a link here. I might modify the sentence with experiencing especially changes in weather. And so I might add a connection with climate change and weather. Impacts of climate change on weather. Well, I'm going to do impacts of climate change, but I'm pretty sure there's an article about that too. So that's adding a link. This activity is also helpful. If you already see climate content on a page, but it's not connected to other articles, so a curious reader can't go, that's really useful. We've recently started seeing some research where some of our climate change topic pages are getting like huge percentages, 60+% of their traffic from readers clicking on links. So this activity of clicking on links is really important, especially when we start thinking about more technical topics that a general public may not be searching for on a website like Google, but may be encountering as they try to make decisions about how does climate change affect me. Similarly, we could also go down to this agriculture section, and you see right now it's mostly treated as a economic section. And I might say take the source that says farmers in Manipur are experiencing unusual weather and women are being heavily affected. And I might add a couple more sentences. The agriculture in Manipur includes a number of smallholding farms, many of whom are women. And so I might add a link to women in agriculture in India. And then I can add this source as a citation. So I would click Cite, try to generate the citation. It works. I'll insert that. Climate change, and especially changes in temperature and weather are hurting small farmers in the state. And then again, I would go through and add the source, the other source I have. And then I get a chance to link to the article that Sumana was working on in a second. So I'll show that to you in a minute. Hopefully this generates. Oh, nope. See, it didn't generate. So I could add a citation here. For right now, I'm not going to do much more work to add that citation, but I'll clean it up later. Women in agriculture are harmed more by women in agriculture in Manipur are harmed more by the changes because of other rural women in other parts of the world. And so I can link to that article on women and climate change. Women in agriculture in Manipur are harmed more by the changes in weather because, and if I remember reading this correctly, of kind of less access to support from community or from local governments, for example. I'm not sure, and I'll go back and check this to make sure I'm saying the right thing. But and then I can go and find the source again, right? So I can do women. What was the name of the source? The name of the source was rural Manipur. So I'll use rural. Yep, there we go. And so adding a paragraph about climate change and agriculture. So you, everyone in this room, everyone in this conference can make edits like this. You will find, especially geography articles in the Global South, have tons of gaps and tons of kind of spaces that are just not covered and don't have citations. And this is a real opportunity to like aggregate that knowledge, share it, make those connections. If you need help finding articles like this, I in my slide deck, and I think we're sharing this later, I have a short link here, w.wiki/356s. And what it does is it'll take you to Wiki Project Climate Change. And we have here on English Wikipedia and also Spanish Wikipedia recommendations on how to get started. And you can see like the edit I just made about geography articles. You have documented processes for doing this. Climate change in agriculture, looking at industry articles. Climate content should be everywhere on Wikipedia. And you don't have to write a full article to make a valuable contribution, as I just showed you. And so I invite you to do this. Another way to think about valuable contributions is to draw connections to images. So every image on Wikipedia, and I'm going to show you an article. So I was looking at the climate change and gender article. You'll notice that we have this image of a woman in Kenya harvesting peas. And there's these opportunities to illustrate Wikipedia with images and with these descriptions. So if I look at the flood images that was talked about by Subodh, so I'll drop that category of images here. You'll see we have these really like heartbreaking images from the flood. And you can, for example, we could imagine taking an image of a house hit by a flood. And going to an article like climate change in India, I'll answer that question about reliable sources in just a second. And so we can take, say, the article like climate change in India, and we could add images of the flooding. For example, in the weather change section, I can take the title of the image that we were looking at, so devastated house, and I could, for example, insert image, and I can search for that image in here. And you see we have those images that they uploaded from the community. And what we can do is we can say, use this image. So image of a house in Hambarli. And I don't know if, I'm not gonna add a link right now, but we can come back and do that later, where a household was destroyed by extreme weather and flooding. As climate change gets worse, many parts of India will experience more extreme weather, which will cause extra rainfall and as well as drought. And then I can insert that image. And just by adding that image, you've kind of created a new, the next time someone reads about climate change in India, they have a communication tool. And we've seen these images travel from Wikipedia pages into news reporting. So as we think about this kind of public archive that Subodh created, there's a real opportunity for like good climate communication images to travel out of Wikipedia from Wikipedia. These images are really easy to use because they're on Wikimedia Commons. Wikimedia Commons is a repository of Creative Commons and public domain images. And you can kind of see this. You can upload files here if you have the licenses to it, but you can also search for like flooding in India, and you can find a whole collection of free images that draw these connections that are dramatic and useful as we start thinking about how we communicate climate change. And because these are freely licensed, you'll see like this one's from the government open license in India. That means they're much easier to reuse than, say, the random image you find on the internet or an image used by a news agency where they paid for the rights. There's a question from the chat from Stelline asking, what are acceptable references? Are videos personal communications by experts or just attributing an individual okay? On the bigger language Wikipedias, oral history is really hard to use, or personal communication. We really prefer publicly published information that has a history of editorial review. So like a news source or kind of expert panels that are curated by reliable organizations like a UN agency might be useful. Usually it's easiest to cite published sources, so like news and academic journal articles. On smaller language Wikipedias, they tend to be more comfortable with working with you as an expert to find like reliable other opinions. And I don't know if Subodh wants to kind of answer that from the Indian context. I think it's a different experience than what I have on English.
No,
Subodh,
we are also avoiding the original research or the personal interviews. We are only referring to the videos made by the trusted organizations working in the sector, reputed ones. So we are not uploading the personal recordings also.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real opportunity here to do it better. and to really capture this other kinds of expert knowledge. Yeah, and so and once you have these images on Commons, you can sometimes, as Subodh was saying earlier, take these images. For example, sorry, I'm opening this link. Take these media files and transcribe them into books, and so you can see, for example, Subodh, which one of these probably has the best book on Wikisource? Or maybe you can show it on your side.
No, due to some internet connectivity here, a lot of thunderstorms are here just now. The climate change is affecting me today only. So
Okay.
I'm not able to show the screen. I'm able to hear only just now. My screen is
Oh,
blank.
okay. Well, once this book is, say, uploaded here, we can go to Wikisource, which is so I'll go to wikisource.org, and the book can be made available as into a transcription platform. So here is an example. Oh, yeah, this is one of the books from the group. So what you'll see is this is no longer the PDF, but actually text that I can copy and paste and search. And how this happened is Subodh and team edited the, so I need to find the index real quick. So they uploaded the PDF to the project, and then we have a tool, a piece of software that allows us to use OCR. We actually have a partnership with Google to get the high-end OCR for Indic languages. And it automatically first tries to read the image, puts it into the text, and then humans need to go in and correct, because even good machine vision doesn't give you good results. And we found that in India in particular, like this kind of transcription has taken a lot of content that would have existed only offline, and made it possible to access it on the internet. And so like a source like this, which I'm not sure what's in the content, but it looks like women in agriculture, is now like readily available in Google search, which would, and a normal just like digitized PDF would not be picked up very well. And so Wikisource, especially in Indic languages, has become incredibly powerful for representing this knowledge. Yeah, I think that's about all I have for a quick introduction for editing. I invite you to check out Wiki Project Climate Change, or to use the handbook that CDCAN developed to teach yourself, or connect with our Wikimedia communities. We really, really hope that you get a chance to do that. And I'll hand it back to you, Emma, if you have anything to wrap up.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex, for that lightning presentation and showing us so many things in such a short space of time. That was really, really brilliant. I also learned some new things there. Hadn't heard about Wikisource before, and that's really exciting to know that's available. And it's really great to see in practice, Subodh, how you've been using it with CIS. That's really fantastic to see as well. So I think, yeah, we only have 5 minutes left. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. But please, if people are there and still have questions, please put them in. We can always get back to you afterwards, potentially. And otherwise, just let us know how you found the session. We'd be really interested to hear any reflections, comments, feedback that you might have for us. Because yeah, this is quite a new thing for CDKN anyway, working with Wikipedia and Wiki in general. Yeah, very fortunate that we have Alex as an incredible colleague that we're working with. So thanks again, Alex, for your presentation and for showing people the kind of very obvious next steps that they can do. And yeah, I would really just encourage everyone to go and look at our guide. It also has links to Wiki Project Climate Change and a lot of the steps that Alex was talking you through in terms of making the first edit, citing your source, and general tips about how to communicate to the Wikipedia audience, as Alex talked us through. So with that, I think we should probably wrap up. I don't know if anyone has any closing words they would just like to say before we finish, any of our speakers. I'll give you the floor for 3 minutes if you'd like to say anything, add some words of encouragement for our attendees. Go ahead. Okay, I think I was a bit broad there and opening to all three of you at once. But yeah, if you have anything you'd like to say, just unmute. Otherwise, I'd like to thank everybody again, all our speakers, Sumana, Subodh and Alex, all of the behind the scenes Adaptation Futures team, and my colleagues Lisa and Michelle from CDKN behind the scenes. And thanks, Darlene, for your questions and your engagement. And yeah, if you'd like to contact us, you can email us at cdkn@southsouthnorth.org. So please get in touch if you'd like to chat further about Wikipedia or learn more, or get any further links from us. Otherwise, thanks very much and enjoy the rest of the conference, everybody.